broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show, in association with DavidIke.com.
Very excited that our next guest has agreed to come on the programme. And I'll tell you some of his books. And I know many of you have read his books because you've been telling me about it all day on email and on social media. Amongst his books are Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Deeper Insights into the Illuminati Formula, and the Illuminati Formula used to create an undetectable, total, mind-controlled slave. You can find him online at pentracks.com. That's pentracks.com. It's terrific to welcome the multi-talented author, broadcaster and researcher, Fritz Springmeier. Fritz, welcome to the programme. How are you?
Hey, hello to you and hello to all of our listeners out there.
Great to have you on, Fritz. It really is. And like I said, great excitement today when I announced on Facebook and on Twitter that you were coming on the programme. Well, I'll tell you where I'm going to start, because I mentioned at the beginning of the programme, I was looking at your Facebook page today, and you very kindly mentioned you were coming on to let your legions, tens of thousands of followers know you were coming on the programme. And what was interesting was you mentioned what I feel is last year's most incredible, staggering, amazing, I suppose viral is a word you could use, story, and that is the Hampstead Heath story. And I said to myself, the fact that you mentioned it today, what better place to start? And first of all, ask you, what do you know of that case, Fritz, about those two young children whom allegedly witnessed unspeakable things happening at their school in London, and all the fallout from that, and you know, the many opinions that have been expressed about it, whether it's real, whether it's a hoax? What are your thoughts on that particular case?
Well, you know, Hampstead Village there is in your neck of the woods, and so the listeners over there in the United Kingdom probably know more about the case than I do, but in case they don't know, you know, Hampstead Village is a place where there's more millionaires in that little village than any other place in the United Kingdom. So we're looking at people with a lot of money. It's also known for having bohemian types and intellectual artistic types there. And so we have some children that are saying that they're satanic ritually abused. And we have a mother who came from Russia. And then we have what appears like, instead of the police investigating this, they're trying to cover it up and coming down hard on the whistleblowers. I don't know the details of this as well as some of your listeners right there in the area, the ins and outs, but it certainly follows the patterns of a lot of other things that we've seen. The system, the people that we should trust, the church and the state, they're involved in this trauma-based mind control. And unfortunately, generally the police will cover up these kind of things because they're involved in it. And so the truth, it's hard to get the truth to come out. You know, the Mark Dutroux affair over there in Belgium, it eventually became bad enough that they had to allow Mark Dutroux to take the fall, but it actually involved over there in Brussels and Belgium a lot of the government of Belgium. And so these things reach high up into the stink reaches high up. And so why do they do this trauma-based mind control? Well, it's like I've said before, it gives evil people the power to carry out any deed totally undetected. So if we get a chance to get into how this mind control works, why it'll make more sense to people, why they use the children like this. They start the programming with satanic ritual abuse when the children are growing up. So they start the mind control when they're just when they're little, you know.
I definitely want to get into this, Fritz, and we're going to go straight into this, into the methods they use and how they do it. And our listeners will be aware that Fritz has spoken for many years about Project Monarch, which was a CIA mind control project. And, Fritz has worked with Cassie O'Brien, who's been on this programme before as well. We'll get into all of that. Fritz, just to tidy that up, because you're absolutely right, by the way. You're there in the United States. We are closer to the story. For our listeners who don't remember, Ella Draper and her partner, Abraham Christie, made allegations. They released some videos of Ella's children, two very young children, talking about alleged abuse that they witnessed at their school in Hampstead Heath. The claims made were that there was a 100 plus strong satanic paedophile ring operating around a primary school in Hampstead Heath, and that terrible things were happening to children there. And the videos which we saw on YouTube of the 8-year-old and the 9-year-old describing these things, awful things, and talking about children being murdered and children being raped, were staggering. We'd never seen anything like it before in the alternative media, children saying these things on camera. And the independent media was divided between people who thought that it might be credible and people who said that it couldn't be. I did what any half decent journalist should do, and that is keep your own opinion out of it. And I was happy to talk about the claims that the children made with Sabine McNeill on this programme. But it was a terrible, terrible thing to see those children saying that. So, Fritz, great to have you on the programme. I'm going to shut up now, hand it over to you. Listeners want to talk about how the Illuminati, how the hidden families, how they practice mind control. How does it work on great swathes of the population who are completely in the dark about it, don't even realise it's happening? How do they go about doing this? What are the tools they use to do it?
Okay, yeah, let's get into this trauma-based mind control. It goes by a lot of names. Some people have heard about Monarch programming, or they've heard about the CIA project MK Ultra. So that's the what. It goes by different names. It's really covered up. In fact, the problem is when people that have been subjected to this type of mind control get examined by psychiatrists and psychologists, they're often misdiagnosed. They say, oh, affective anxiety disorder, bipolar, or they say that they're histrionic or paranoid, schizophrenic, schizoaffective. They have all, or post-traumatic stress syndrome. They have all of these mislabels. And you can go back and historically look at some big news stories. We had someone over here called Charlie Manson. I'm sure most of the people over there in England have heard of Charlie Manson. And he was a programmed multiple. This whole thing works off of splintering the mind and making it into a multiple personality. And so oftentimes, these things start out with children that are orphans, and Charlie Manson said that one time his mother sold him for a pitcher of beer to a childless waitress.
Wow.
So when the shrinks went in and looked at him, what did they label him? They said, well, he's schizophrenic and he's paranoid delusional disorder. Well, one of the things about this mind control is the people that have MPD, which is now called DID. MPD stands for multiple personality disorder, and DID means dissociative identity disorder. When they go in and take the MMPI, I don't know if they use the MMPI test over there in the UK, but in the United States, that's a standard test that they give to see what your personality is like or what disorders you might have. Well, when people take the MMPI, the schizophrenic and the program multiple answer a couple of the questions exactly the same way. So that allows these shrinks to misdiagnose them. But like Ted Bundy, he was another one of these program multiples. We had had this serial killer called Ted Bundy. I'm sure your people over there probably heard about him too. And
Oh yeah,
he
yeah.
was on, he was on the Seattle Crime Commission. He was on Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign in '68. Well, the first shrink that went in, she goes, well, he's got bipolar disorder. But then when she was around him a lot more, she realized he was switching personalities. And then she realized this guy's MPD. He's multiple personality. So this also explains like a lot of history. For people wonder, well, why could Hitler 1 hour be talking to people in a convincing way that he wanted peace, and the next hour talking to his generals about starting World War II? It's because Hitler was a multiple personality. And all of this went back to the ancient mystery religions, to the pharaohs. And so why would you, if you were Pharaoh, want your children to be programmed like this? Well, as a Pharaoh, you wanted to make sure that your child was exactly like what you wanted them to be. So that's why they got into this mind control. So your elite families, your German, Scottish, Dutch, Italian, English families, these elite families were doing this trauma-based mind control for centuries. And now in the 20th century, in the 21st century, it's now gotten out of hand. It's no longer just being done by these abusive elite families. It's being done by our intelligence agencies like MI5, MI6, CIA, NSA. Why would the CIA want to do this type of trauma-based mind control? Well, because it produces the perfect spy. You compartmentalize their mind. If your spy gets captured by the other side and tortured, they'll just switch to a personality that likes torture. And the foundation of this mind control is incredible sadistic amounts of trauma and torture. So that's why someone like Charles Manson or Ted Bundy, they have been tortured their whole lives. So they don't think anything of torturing and traumatizing and doing sadistic murders on other people.
Now, Fritz, sorry to interrupt, they weren't used by the system in the way that you've described. And this is brilliant stuff, by the way. I'm really interested in this. Delighted that you're on the programme. Speak to why the likes of Bundy and Manson. Bundy went around the country killing women, and Manson did, or allegedly did, what he did to Sharon Tate and to others. Why were they cast off then from that programme? Is that how it works, Fritz?
Well, no. See, in the 1960s, the CIA was investigating how cults could be created to control people. So they set up a number of cults. In 1967, Charlie Manson came into San Francisco and established himself as a guru. Yeah, he was just a criminal, and he was this program multiple. But the people, mostly women that he had, were in his cult, were programmed multiples. They were all programmed multiples. And so the CIA was trying to see how can we, and that wasn't the only religious group that they created. They created a whole number of religious groups. They worked through these little cults that they have created. Jim Jones was another CIA operation where a lot of the people in the Jim Jones cult were under this trauma-based mind control. So they were exploring how do you use God or something like this, or Charlie Manson said he was Christ. How do you set some religious figure up, and how they were working at the dynamics of this. In the 50s, they had tried to perfect the mind control with an individual, and then in the 60s, they were upgrading to how you apply this mind control to small groups, and now they've been trying to upgrade it to how do you control an entire country with this mind control. This trauma-based mind control has spread all over the world. Years ago, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, years ago, I was at a security conference. I was to be a speaker. This was right next door to where it was at a Sheridan, real close to where the CIA has their headquarters in Northern Virginia. Anyway, the embassies around the world all sent their delegations to this conference. And there were only 3 countries out of the entire world where their delegates would stop and talk to me. It was obvious that they had been told not to interact with me at all because their heads would turn and they would march past my booth. The reason why I mention that is just to get people aware of how widespread this is. It's gone around the world, and many governments are involved. And so the Western intelligence agencies, MI6 and CIA, are really behind the ISIS phenomenon. But Mossad is doing this kind of trauma-based mind control. So sometimes when Israel needs a terrorist so that they can get the world's sympathy, you'll see when the world is coming down hard on Israel for doing something wrong, and the UN has they've passed resolutions against Israel. The next thing you'll notice is there'll be some Muslim that will blow up a school bus of Israeli children. Well, this is really not Arabs doing this. Ultimately, what it is Israel needs a terrorist act to get the world sympathy. So these people that they have used trauma-based mind control on, they activate one of these people. And so right now, a lot of these people in Europe and in the Middle East that are doing these horrendous things are under this trauma-based mind control. Unfortunately, it's spread to the Muslim community too, and it's being used to create terrorists.
Here's a question for you, Fritz. Because you mentioned Israel, could the likes of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, could he be somebody placed in the position that he's in because he's been subject to this mind control himself in his formative years, because he's desensitized to the suffering and the misery of human beings in the West Bank and in Gaza? And that question was actually put to us by Sean on email, and it's a very good question. Are some of the leaders of some of the Western democracies and some of the superpower countries possibly themselves products of mind control?
Yes, definitely. There's different levels of mind control, but yeah, definitely the majority of them have been subjected to some level of mind control. Not all of them trauma-based mind control, but definitely are the majority of them are subjected to some type of mind control. And yes, yeah, you're right. They're insensitive, although they make pretensions of caring about people. Really, ultimately, they don't.
And this is fascinating, Fritz, because we're really being played like clowns then, us as civilians, because I'm doing my monologue at the beginning of the programme and I'm attacking the British Prime Minister David Cameron for his inhumane, I would say criminal, well, it's beyond criminal, decisions that he makes to affect people in this country. And there I'm thinking that while not giving this guy a pass, because we're not giving him a pass, who knows what this guy's been subjected to while he was at university, while he was at college. By the way, I must mention David Icke, who is, of course, a great friend and colleague of mine. So David Icke just listened to the programme now, Fritz, big supporter of your work and what you've been doing. So he sends you his best, my friend. Sends you his best.
Thank you, David Icke. And, we're all in this together. we all need to stick together. We may have different religious views, we may have different ideas on different things, but we are in this together, and we are the common people. We are not each other's enemies. We're, you know, there's examples of where people have come together and worked against tyranny, and I was just writing last night about some 6 villages in France during World War II that worked together, even though they had different religious beliefs. Some were Protestants, Catholics, some were agnostics, and so we need to have that spirit of cooperation, and that's what I appreciate about David, is that he realizes that, and doesn't get caught up in because what they're doing to the population on is really basically the same thing that they do with the victim of trauma-based mind control. What they do to the victim of trauma-based mind control is they split them up into competing personalities that are all programmed, that hate each other. And so
we see this in the independent media, don't we? In the alternative media, we see this very thing. And this, people turning on one another. And you quite rightly said there, David is avoided that. In fact, he's a big champion of the independent media and doesn't get involved in that. But Fritz, again, I'm going to be honest, I'm not just saying this. I've not really considered that until now. Now, I know David will probably say later on, Richie, I told you this before, and he probably did, but I've not considered that sort of mind control is being directed at people working within the independent media. But it makes perfect sense that it must be.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I am naive, Fritz. I'm a naive guy a lot of times, but yeah, it must be happening, of course.
When I started exposing the world system and their new world order agenda and the mind control and everything back in 1990, I expected that some of the other people out there that were doing similar things would be friends and treat me as a colleague. And I found out, no, actually, the majority of people out there are actually working for the system. There's a book, 1984, that I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are familiar with. And when this guy tries to leave Big Brother's rule, that Big Brother has actually set up something. He set up his own opposition. And so that's what they do, is they set up their own opposition. So I found that out the hard way, is that people I thought would be friends would turn on me and stab me in the back. They would be out there saying slanderous lies about me. They wouldn't even know me, and they would be tearing me apart. And you would think, well, these are supposed to be people on helping
on the same side,
fight the tyranny, and yet they're tearing me apart. So yeah, and like I say, it's what gives evil the power to carry out all these things, and it's totally undetectable. It's really hard. I mean, once you're familiar with it, and you know the clues, you can start picking up these kind of things. It's like this teacher was telling me that one of her students was just giving her fits, that it was driving her crazy. And the more I listened, I said, you know what you've got there? You've got someone that's been subjected to this trauma-based mind control. I said, is it okay with the school if I have you and her out for lunch and we, get to know this girl a little bit better? Well, it turns out that this young girl, I'm trying to remember, she was like in 3rd or 4th grade. She had tried to tell the school officials how she was being sexually abused and satanic ritually abused, and the school covered it up. So this is the problem that we have, is people ask, well, how can this be going on and we don't hear about it? It's because the people in positions of power that are supposed to be protecting us are actually, this thing is so widespread that the people that we're hoping are going to protect the children are actually part of the problem.
Fritz, it's 20